Hey guys, here we are again. Um, I wanted to let you know I really appreciated the way you guys supported each other in the prayer requests and in the comments. I was hoping when I created that assignment that you would understand the purpose, what I was trying to do, and you did this. See, we really need each other in a time like this. We need to be there to encourage and pray for each other and help each other out, stand with each other. That's our job, and you guys are doing a splendid job. Yay, way to go. All right, for this week, there are three videos. There's this one, and then there are two more connected to the Bible Project. There was a little bit of overlap between mine and those, but not too much. And there's stuff on mine that will not be on theirs, and there's some stuff on theirs that won't be on mine. And they're going to be questions from both of them. So I want to make sure you did all three. So that's why you have a list of questions. Do the questions, turn them in by Saturday, and we'll be in business. But we are looking at 1st and 2nd Samuel. And I've got a PowerPoint here I'm going to share with you in just a sec, as soon as I can get this thing up. Oh, there we go. 1st and 2nd Samuel. Wait a minute. That's David and Goliath. Where are we? We're going to get up to the top here. Ah, there we go. Now we're in business. So the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel really was one big book called Samuel, and it just was divided into two because of the length of the scrolls. And it's the story really of David. It really is David's story, but it's bookended by a couple of other people. The main characters really in 1st and 2nd Samuel are Samuel, who's the prophet, David, who's the first king of Israel. I'm sorry, Saul, who's the first king of Israel. Saul, not David. Saul, the first king of Israel. David, the second king of Israel. And then Solomon, it comes to the very end, Solomon, the third king. And that will pick up in 1st Kings, which we're going to do next week. Anyway, the book starts out with Samuel. Samuel was born by a woman named Hannah. And Hannah was barren. She didn't have a child. And back in the Bible times, your children, that was like your value as a mother, particularly. Like if you didn't have children, it was like the curse of God is what it felt like. And she did not have a child. You see this over and over again in the Bible, a childless mother who prays to God and God answers the prayer. We saw that with Abraham and Sarah, and we see it right here with Hannah. She doesn't have a baby, and so she goes and she prays to God where the priest is. She's praying to God, asking God to give her a baby, and the priest Eli sees her and he thinks she's drunk. And she says, "I'm not drunk, I'm just distraught." Sometimes people they really emotionally get into it when trials and troubles are on. This is happening today with the coronavirus, isn't it? Anyway, she's praying and asking God, please, please help me. I need your help. I need a child. I need a son. And if you give me one, I'll give him back to you. And lo and behold, that's what happens. She gets pregnant. She has a little boy. And so she brings him to Eli the priest. She brings it to Eli the priest and says, I'm going to give him to you. I'm going to dedicate him to you. This is where we get the idea of baby dedication. Some churches baptize babies, others dedicate them. And whichever tradition you're from, this is the idea that you bring your child to God, you give your child to God. But she literally gave Samuel to the priest and said, I want you to raise him up in God's ways, in God's house. Eli was sort of the keeper of the Ark of the Covenant and stuff like that. Well, anyway, she left him there, and say little Samuel, he ends up helping Eli. He's like a little priest in the making. One night, Samuel hears a voice in the middle of the night, Samuel, Samuel. So he thinks Eli's calling him. He goes, Eli, Eli, did you call me? No, go back to bed. Samuel, Samuel. He hears it again. He goes and asks, no, 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 go back to bed. You're just hearing things. Samuel, Samuel. He hears this voice over and over. And finally, Eli realizes that it must be God. And so he says, next time say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And when Samuel, like the voice comes again, Samuel, Samuel, and he says, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And then God speaks a judgment on the house of Eli. And he says, you tell Eli that he has not obeyed me. His sons have not obeyed me. There's evil and wickedness in the house of God, and this must stop. And I'm bringing an end to your priesthood. And can you imagine poor Samuel having to tell Eli this? And the next morning, Eli says, what did you hear? And then Samuel says, well, here it is. And he tells him, and Eli says, may it be according to what God says. And sure enough, right after that, the children of Israel go with the Ark of the Lord, the Ark of the Covenant. They actually go to fight against the Philistines. They're using the Ark as a good luck charm, but they run out of luck. And God actually sides with the Philistines on this one. And Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, both die. They both die in the battle. And the Ark of the Covenant was captured by the Philistines. And when the news came back to Eli about what happened, Eli was old and he was overweight and he was just sitting there, and a messenger comes in and tells him, and he falls over backwards in his chair and he dies. And what a tragedy. They lose their priest, they lose the priest's sons, but most of all, they lose the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is now like captured. It's stolen by the Philistines. And so the Philistines have it, and they put it before their god Dagon. Some say Dagon, Dagon is what I say. Their idol Dagon, in the temple of Dagon. Well, the next morning they come in, and he's like face down. He's face down in front of the Ark of the Covenant. He's all busted up and stuff, and they're freaked out by this. And then they start getting tumors and stuff, like these big tumors start popping out on the Philistine skin, and they're like, we've been plagued. And so they're just like freaking out. So what they do is they send it back. They send it back. They send the ark back with a guilt offering. 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats. Now, if we were in class, I would have you guys actually literally make out of golden aluminum foil tumors and rats. But since we can't do that, you just have to imagine it. 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats. We don't know exactly why the rats, except for maybe they were run over with a infestation of rats as well, and they were trying to get things squared away. But anyway, there's a lot more we could say about that, but we got to move on. There's plenty of other stuff we're going to talk about. Saul, the first king of Israel. Samuel grows up and becomes the mighty prophet. He's like God's anointed one, but the people start clamoring for a king. We need a king. They have all these judges, and you've seen the cycle. Remember the cycle of the judges? They sin, and then there's judgment on them, and then there's a calamity that happens, and then they repent, and then God sends a deliverer, a judge, and they do pretty well for a little bit, and then they sin again, and then there's another calamity, and then they repent. So there's this big cycle. I'm wondering if maybe some of what we're experiencing might be something to call us back to repentance right now in the world. Well, anyway, the people, they're tired of judges, and they say, we want a king, we want a king. And, God is their king, God is their ruler. And Samuel tries to tell them that, but they won't listen. And then Samuel prays to God about it, and God says, go ahead, anoint a king, and I'll tell you who to anoint. And this guy Saul starts out as a really good king. I mean, he has lots of potential. He's head and shoulders taller than everybody else. That doesn't mean he has a dandruff problem, but he's just head and shoulders taller than everyone. He's good looking. He just commands authority. A sharp guy, but he's got some deep down character flaws, and they come out right away. He's impulsive. He's self-centered, self-focused. He's paranoid, and it comes out pretty quickly. Like one thing that happens, they're on a battle with the Philistines, and Saul says, "All right, listen. Anybody that eats anything before this battle is won will be put to death. We need to fast. So that way, if we fast enough, maybe God will hear us and God will be on our side." His own son, Jonathan, was out on a scouting mission when he made that declaration, and he didn't even know it. And he eats some honey. And it just helps him and invigorates him. And somehow the word gets back, and Saul like gets mad, and he's going to like command the death of his own son Jonathan. But the people, the soldiers are just, are you crazy? Are you nuts? You see, Jonathan actually led them to victory, and the soldiers are saying, "You're just nuts. You wouldn't do that. Don't do that." And so Saul relents. But just the fact that he would not let his soldiers eat when they're getting ready to go fight a battle shows how paranoid he is. There's a time where Saul is commanded to wait until Samuel prepares the sacrifice to God, and he waits for Samuel to show up, and finally he gets impatient and he just does the sacrifice himself. He says, "I'm just going to do it myself, and I can do a sacrifice. I don't have to wait for God's man to come and give a blessing for here. We need to get going. We need to do this thing." He's impatient. And just as he's fulfilling the sacrifice, Samuel shows up. He says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I got to sacrifice. We got to sacrifice." And Samuel says, "To obey is better than sacrifice." And rebellion, he says, is like the art of witchcraft. He says, you're no better than a witch. You're no better than a Satanist if you rebel against what God is telling you to do. And so at this point, what happens is God takes away the kingdom. There's another thing where they have a battle, and they're supposed to kill like the king and all of the enemy, but they don't. They keep a lot of it and even the king for plunder, if you will. And Samuel finds him out and just rebukes him. So the kingdom is taken away from Saul. I mean, he's still king, but the authority of the kingdom is taken away, and the favor of God is taken away from Saul. And Samuel knows that there's another king that's going to come, and so God directs him and guides him in search of the new king. God leads him to the house of Jesse, and he says to Jesse, "One of your sons, I think, is supposed to be king." So Jesse marches out all of his sons, and not one of them, like starting from the oldest all the way down the line, not one of them is, "Nope, that's not him. Nope, 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 nope." And then finally, like, there aren't any more. And like Samuel says, "Aren't there any more kids you have?" He says, "Well, yeah, there's the runt of the litter. There's David. He's way out in the back field watching the sheep." And Samuel says, "Go get him." "Yeah, are you kidding me? David? No. Yeah, let's try it." And so he goes out, and they go out and they get David, they bring him in, and God says, "This is the one." And so the young man David is anointed. Samuel anoints him as the king over Israel. Now, he's not king yet. He's going to be. He's still a kid. He's still being prepared to be the king. In fact, he's being prepared by facing lions and facing bears as they try to attack the sheep. But David knows now that someday he's going to be king. And this gets tested just a little bit later. They're out on the battlefield, the older brothers and everything, they're out on the battlefield, and they're facing the Philistines, and there's this giant named Goliath, this like 9-something foot tall giant Goliath. And he comes out, and he says, hey, let's instead of having a battle here, let's just do a mano to mano. You send a fighter, I'll send a fighter. It'll be like WWF World Championship fighting, and whoever wins, then we'll all be servants for each other. Like, so the winner, like the losers here, they'll be servants of the winners. And so whoever it is, just take me on one. Who'll fight me? Who'll come and fight me? Who'll fight me? And nobody will do it. The Israelites are all hunkering down. They're hiding and stuff. They're scared. And David shows up. He has lunch for his brothers. His dad wanted him to check on the battle, and he brought some food, some grub for his big brothers. And so here comes the kid, the runt of the litter. Here comes David. And he sees this giant who's going to fight me. And David is like, well, who's taking on the big guy? Why don't anybody do anything about this? And they say, are you kidding me? He's big. He'll kill us. And David says, well, I'll do it. And they're like, you can't do it. Well, yeah, I can. And so they end up, Saul, the king, they take him to Saul, and Saul says, well, you're a nut, kid. You're just stupid. But if somebody's got to do it, I might as well be you that gets killed. And so he says, how about if I give you my armor so you can go? So he tries to put on King Saul's armor. It's way too big, too clunky. So he takes off the armor and says, nah, just leave me with my slingshot. And so that's exactly what he does. He goes out, and the Goliath just laughs when he sees the kid. You're coming out to fight me? Like, they're sending a little boy with rocks? He says, what am I, a dog? You're going to come after me with sticks and stones? He says, ha, 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 ha. And David says, you come to me with a spear and a sword, but I come to you in the name of the Lord. And he takes his sling and the Goliath is like, ha, 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 boom. And he goes face down, just like, remember back here, hang on just a second. There it is. Yeah. Dagon, the Philistine god, goes face down at the Ark of the Covenant, and Goliath goes face down in front of David. He wasn't going face down to worship David. He was going face down, like to say, this is like God wins the battle. God wins the victory. Israel's God is bigger than Philistine's God. Now, hey, I've got a rap I'm going to do. Man, I don't know if this works by Zoom or not, but here we go. I'm going to give her a shot, okay? All right, here you go. Oh, here we go. Ha. David was a man after God's own heart. Even as a kid, he had a great start. He killed the bearded lion and the bear. Oh my, but fame came his way when he got the big guy. Boom, 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 whoop, whoop. You see, there was a giant feared throughout the land, eliminating people by the sweep of his hand. Goliath was his name. He was 10 feet tall. And we all know nobody tried to make the big guy fall. Boom, 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 boom. He carried a javelin, a sword, and a spear. Whoever stood before him was paralyzed with fear. He was a bad dude, I think, and he was cool, but we all know better. The guy was a fool. Boom, 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 boom. David knew it wasn't by his own might that he could even challenge Goliath to a fight. So he went out before the dude with sling and a stone, knowing that the battle was the Lord's and not his own. So Goliath roared with laughter, saying, when we are through, you just be a spot on the bottom of my shoe. David said, I'm here so that all will see that the Lord is God and the strength is in me. Boom, 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 boom. And he threw the stone, and to the people's surprise, he hit that gnarly dude right between the eyes, and the big guy fell face to the ground. He finally been defeated, finally brought right down. When the Philistines saw that the champion was dead, they all turned around and away they fled. And David was a hero. The battle he had won, but if it wasn't for the Lord, it could not have been done. Boom, 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 boom. You too can win your battle with the help of the Lord. Just get to know him better and the power of his word. And when you are defeated and really quite sad, remember, God makes good everything that seems so bad. Word. There you go. My David and Goliath rap. Ha. Thought you'd get a kick out of that. Okay, anyhow, so he kills Goliath. They win the battle. The children of Israel are ecstatic, the whole nation. And so and then from there on, he becomes this mighty warrior, and he ends up killing all kinds of Philistines, and the women in the cities, they start singing and shouting in the streets, and they're singing this song: Saul has slain his thousands, but David is 10,000s. Saul has slain his thousands, and David is 10,000s. Now, that didn't go over real well with Saul. I mean, here he's the leader. There's nothing worse than an insecure leader. See, if he would have been a secure leader, he would have just been really happy that he had a warrior that would win the battle. But Saul was insecure, and he didn't even know that he'd been anointed as king. But David was a harpist. I mean, yeah, he played the harp. And Saul had these bad moods sometimes, and then he would call and ask David to come in. And one day, David is playing his harp for Saul, and then Saul just takes his javelin, his spear, he just he throws it, goes right into the wall. David ducks. Now this happens 2 times actually. Saul throws a spear and David ducks. Sometimes insecure leaders throw spears. You ever have a boss like that, or a person in your life who they just shoot at you that for no good reason? They just throw things at you. I like how David handled that. He doesn't take a spear and throw it back. That's the natural tendency, to get defensive, to throw back spears. But he doesn't do it. He just ducks. And then Saul ends up feeling bad, feeling guilty, wish he wouldn't do it, and he ends up giving his daughter to David in marriage. But what he says is, I want you to have my daughter, Michal. I guess that's a guy's name, but her name was Michal. That was his daughter, Saul's daughter. So David becomes Saul's son-in-law, even though Saul hates him. And talk about dysfunctional family right there. But Saul says, but listen, here, you got to give me a dowry for her. Dowry is like the price that a husband pays to a father, the bride's father, for the wife. And so here's, like in today, like over in some countries, it's like cows or oxen, that kind of thing, or some land. Well, what he said was, I want 100 Philistine foreskins. And so David actually goes out and fights and kills 100 Philistines and takes the foreskins for the dowry. Now that's quite a dowry. David's best friend was Jonathan. That was Saul's son. And that's really an unusual thing, because Jonathan could have been the king. And somehow Jonathan figures it out that David is supposed to be king, not him. And Jonathan's totally okay with that, because he sees that David's the right guy. They become really good friends. And actually, Jonathan ends up saving David's life. And he realizes that his dad is going to kill David, so he tells him to run, to flee. And so David runs from Saul. He runs and he hides. He goes to the priests of a place called Nob. And these guys actually have Goliath's sword. It's like they're keeping it as a keepsake, a memento. And so they give David bread, they give him Goliath's sword, and he thanks them so much. And then a little bit later, Saul's soldiers come, and Saul too, and they're looking for David, and they realize that the priests of Nob have helped David, and so they kill them all. They kill all these priests only for doing a deed of goodness. You can see what kind of craziness we see in Saul. One day, Saul is sleeping in the cave of Adullam, and David sees him. He knows where he is. So David's hiding. Saul's trying to find him, and David sneaks in the middle of the night while Saul is sleeping. Well, actually, that's what the King James Bible says, and Bible storybooks say that he's sleeping. He's not sleeping. You know what he's doing? In the Hebrew, it says covering his feet. Remember that? Remember what covering his feet is? Yeah, he was doing his business in the cave. And David sneaks in and cuts off a piece of his robe. He cuts off a piece of his robe. Now that's just like saying his authority in a way. They had these tassels on the bottom of their garment that represented their authority, and he cut it off. And then David felt guilty about that, felt bad about it. Later on, he says, you, when he's far enough away so Saul's not going to get him. He says, look, I could have killed you, but I didn't. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not your enemy. Why are you chasing me? Why are you fighting me? And Saul says, you're a better man than me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But then he goes back and tries to kill him again. Saul was nuts. By the way, I've been in the cave of Adullam. I've climbed in there. Those of you who maybe someday are going to go to Israel, maybe you'll get to go there too. It's an incredible thing. You actually have to crawl on your hands and knees and get on inside. And there's some bigger spaces once you get in there. But what an incredible place that is. David ends up running into this couple. His soldiers are hungry. There's this farmer. He's got plenty of food to share. David comes and says, listen, can you help me? And this guy named Nabal, the word Nabal means stupid. He's stupid. And he lives up to his name. Nabal and his wife Abigail. And Nabal says, I'm not going to help you. No, I'm not going to help you. I need all this food for myself. Now he has plenty left over to take care of lots of people, but he's a hog and he's selfish and he's not going to do it. He's not going to share. And then Abigail, his wife, she sees what's going on. And David and his soldiers are angry. They're starving. They're going to need something. And David's about ready to kill Nabal. And Abigail comes out. She goes, no. Listen, you can have it all. Just take food. It's great. We'll take care of you. We got it. And because of Abigail's wisdom, she spares her husband. Although her husband, when he hears what she's done, he goes, oh, and he falls over dead. And so then David says to Abigail, I like you. So like he marries her. So he has kind of multiple wives. This gets him into trouble later on. But Abigail saves the day, and Nabal means stupid. Well, eventually, there's, Saul just keeps going crazier and crazier. There's lots of stories tied to this. One night, he just has this foreboding. There's a battle that he's going to be facing the next day, and he goes to a witch, the witch of Endor, Saul does. She summons up dead spirits. Well, she's sort of like a Whoopi Goldberg, if you've ever seen Ghost. She's like a fake witch, but Saul thinks she's a real witch, and so he goes to her and he says, hey, can you summon the spirit of Samuel? And so she's like summoning the spirit of Samuel, and then actually Samuel's spirit literally comes. Now, I'm not sure that she's a fake witch. The Bible doesn't quite say that. I'm just imagining it that way. And so I'm guessing like Saul and the witch. Oh! And Saul says, tomorrow you're going to die. Tomorrow you're going to die. And that's exactly what happens. The very next day, Saul dies. They lose the battle, and it's very obvious that he's going to die. And so Saul has been wounded, but he actually thrusts himself on his own sword, but he doesn't die. And so he asks somebody to help him out. And finally, this guy helps him out, and he dies. Jonathan dies. It's just a tragedy all the way around. It's the place where this happens is called Bet Shean. And you can actually go and see the place. And they cut off Saul's head and they hung it on a tree at Bet Shean. This is my wife Kathy and me at Bet Shean, where Saul's head was hung on the tree. Then David is actually crowned king. There's another son of Saul who tries to do it, but nobody wants him. So they kill him, and David becomes the king. And David's a good king, and he seeks after God. He reaches out after God. He has a good heart towards God, and God blesses David. What he does is he goes to a city in Jerusalem. You can actually go to this place called the City of David in Jerusalem. You can actually walk inside it, where David lived, where his palace was, and stuff like that. I was there just a couple years ago. Incredible thing. But anyway, David goes into this city, Jerusalem. He goes through the water shaft. And you can actually go through that water shaft when you visit Israel someday. They go through the water shaft. They come out on the other side. They conquer from the inside out, open up the gates. The soldiers come in. They take it over. They name it Jerusalem, the city of peace. That's what Jerusalem means, city of peace. And David also names it Zion. So Zion and Jerusalem are the same thing. And that becomes then the capital of Israel. And it's still like just recently, it was called the capital, the political capital of Israel once again, Jerusalem, the greatest city on the earth. One day, David says, "Are there any more? Are there any more of Saul's kids? Are there any more of Saul's kids that are relatives that are around?" And now, if a king is asking if the former king's relatives are around, the reason is because the king wants to kill them. But that's not David's heart. He wants to bless them, and he finds out that Jonathan had a son. The son's name was Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth. Say that 10 times real fast. And when they were running after Saul had died and the defeat had happened, and there was a nurse who was carrying baby Mephibosheth, and she drops him and he's crippled. He's crippled. And David finds out about this, who's crippled for the rest of his life. And he invites Mephibosheth to the king's table. And so he eats. You know, a lot of us, we act like we're paupers and we're crippled and we're hiding from the king. But the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, wants us to feast at his table and come with all of our brokenness and all that. We come to the table, and what a beautiful picture that is of our salvation, that David brings Mephibosheth and he eats with him. David's family dysfunction, though, like I mentioned earlier, there's with Saul's daughter, Michal, and she's got all kinds of weird stuff. She has like bitterness in her heart and stuff, and then there's just all kinds of things, wacky things that happen, and we see like this is the worst thing that happens. David has an affair. It's probably not even so much an affair as it is he takes advantage of a young lady. If this would be today, Bathsheba would be a part of the Me Too movement. She's taking a bath, and David's on his rooftop, and he sees her. He watches her taking a bath, and he doesn't look away or anything, and so she doesn't even know. And here he is just ogling her, and he ends up asking his servants to go get her, and so she comes. And he ends up having sex with her. She gets pregnant. Like her bathing was a part of like the cleansing ritual after a menstrual cycle. She was most fertile at this time. He gets her pregnant. Her husband Uriah is out at war, fighting for David. And this was actually the time when the kings were supposed to be off at war. And here's David back home. He's not even supposed to be. He's where he's not supposed to be. He sees what he isn't supposed to see, and he does what he doesn't supposed to do. I mean, what he isn't supposed to do. He takes this woman, takes advantage of her. She becomes pregnant. Then he panics. He calls her husband back so maybe he can sleep with her and he can pretend like he's the one that gets her pregnant, but he won't sleep with her. He refuses to do that. And so then David ends up sending him back, having him killed on the front lines, assassinates him on the front lines, then takes Bathsheba to be his wife. So you can see there's this weird family, crazy dysfunction that happens, and it comes out in David's kids. By the way, Nathan the prophet calls David out. He comes and sees him one day and says, "You are the man that has done the bad thing." He gives a parable and that says, "And that is you, and judgment is upon you." The baby dies, but the next son that comes along from Bathsheba is Solomon, who becomes the next king. So God can make something good out of something bad. Like I said about the family dysfunction, David has some kids. Tamar is one of them. Amnon is another. Amnon, who is the next in line for the throne, falls in love with his stepsister Tamar and ends up raping her. And that's just a horrible thing that Amnon does. And then there's another son, Absalom, and Absalom hears about this, and he hates Amnon for what he did to Tamar. And so he kills Amnon. And so, like, in some ways, Absalom was right in this vengeance, because David doesn't do anything, and Absalom has resentment in his heart towards his dad. But then he lets this fester, this resentment just festers, and eventually he ends up trying to take the throne from his own dad. So, like, when people are coming into town and stuff, he's on the edge of town. He says, "Well, what's your problem?" He's, "Oh, wow. Well, if I were king, I would handle it this way." And yeah, boy, dad's a terrible king, isn't he? And so, like, he starts sowing discord and dissension. And this goes up into a full-blown rebellion. And so, like, a whole bunch of people side with Absalom, and there's a civil war, and Absalom takes over the palace, and David flees and runs. But then there's an actual battle, that a big battle that takes place, and David's forces eventually win. God's blessing is still on David, and as Absalom is fleeing, he's running. He has long hair, and somehow his hair gets tangled in the branches. And so his horse goes, and he's just dangling, and some of David's soldiers come, and they use him as their dartboard, and they kill Absalom. David mourns the loss of Absalom. He mourns the death of Absalom, and it's just such a sad thing. David dreams of building a temple. He talks about building a temple. So, like, the Ark of the Covenant and the worship is not in the tabernacle in a tent anymore, but an actual physical temple in Jerusalem. But God says, you're not allowed to build it because you've shed too much blood. And so what's going to have to happen is that Solomon, David's son, is going to be the one to build the temple. So David's life starts out really well, and then he goes downhill. Same thing with Saul. Saul starts well, goes downhill. David comes back, though, and we see at the end of 2 Samuel his reminiscences and his repentances and things. And we'll be looking a little bit later at the next time on Solomon, and then we'll look at some of the literature that David wrote that speaks to these things. So David has a heart after God. He makes mistakes, but yet then he comes back. And that's the good news, that no matter how bad we've blown it, how bad our mistakes have been, God redeems us, he forgives us, and he loves us. Well, I've yacked on for a long, long time. Good enough. God bless you guys. We'll see you next week.